Mom always called my brother the sun and me the shadow, but throwing me into a freezing garage during a blizzard so he could sleep off a hangover was a new low. Huddled on oily concrete. I thought this was rock bottom. I was wrong. Real hell started when I spotted terrified eyes behind old cardboard boxes. That homeless girl held the key to $1 billion empire, and soon, the family who despised me would be begging at my feet. My name is Gloria Fairbanks, and at 29 years old, I had just made the most foolish mistake of my life. I had finally paid off the mortgage on the family home. It was the culmination of 5 years of eating instant noodles, working 80-hour weeks at Apex Horizon, and denying myself every simple pleasure a woman my age should enjoy. I thought I was buying security. I thought I was buying love. As I dragged my suitcase up the driveway, the wheels catching on the cracked pavement, I realized I had only bought my own prison. The storm had started an hour ago, a biting nor'easter that turned the Pennsylvania sky a bruised purple. The wind whipped ice crystals against my face, stinging my skin, but the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill that went down my spine when I looked at the front lawn. There were boxes, my boxes. They were stacked haphazardly near the curb, already sodden with melting snow. My college textbooks, my drafting supplies, the vintage lamp I had bought with my first paycheck, all of it sitting out like garbage waiting for the sanitation truck. I dropped my suitcase handle, ignoring the exhaustion that rattled in my bones from the 6-hour flight back from Chicago, and ran toward the pile. The front door opened before I could scream. My mother, Sylvia, stood there, wrapped in a cashmere shawl I had bought her for Christmas. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Quietly, Gloria," she hissed, holding a finger to her lips. "He is brainstorming. The energy in the house needs to remain pure." I stood there, shivering, holding a wet cardboard box that was falling apart in my hands. You mean Preston, Mom? Why is my life on the lawn?" "Preston is pivoting," Sylvia said, her voice dropping to that reverent whisper she reserved solely for my brother. Preston was 32, unemployed, and had pivoted more times than a spinning top. "He needs a dedicated workspace, a command center. Your room has the best light. Gloria, the feng shui expert said the north-facing window is crucial for his financial chakra." "My room," I choked out. "Mom, I pay the bills here. That is my room. Where am I supposed to sleep?" Sylvia sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation that suggested I was being incredibly unreasonable. "We cleared out the garage for you. It is spacious, private. Besides, you are barely ever here with that job of yours. Preston needs stability right now. He is on the verge of something big. Tech, I think, or maybe cryptocurrency." I looked past her into the warm, yellow light of the hallway. I saw my stepfather, Bob, sitting in his armchair. He heard us. I knew he heard us. But he just kept his eyes glued to the television, his spine curved in permanent submission. He would not save me. He never did. "The garage," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "There is no insulation in the garage. Mom, it is 20 degrees out here." "Put on a sweater," she snapped, her patience evaporating. "Stop being so selfish. Your brother is fragile right now. He has debts, I mean. Investments that require focus. If you cause a scene and disturb his creative flow, you are hurting this family. Do not make me choose. Gloria, you know I hate to choose." She didn't have to choose. She had chosen Preston the day he was born. I was just the insurance policy, the mule bred to carry the load so her golden stallion could run free. I should have stormed in. I should have thrown them out. Legally, my name was on the deed alongside hers. But the psychological conditioning of 29 years is a heavy chain to break. The fear of being the bad daughter, the one who abandons her aging mother and troubled brother, paralyzed me. I turned away, tears freezing on my lashes, and began hauling my wet boxes toward the detached garage. The garage was a tomb. The air smelled of old motor oil, mildew, and the sharp metallic tang of rust. My breath plumed in front of me as I fumbled for the light switch. A single naked bulb flickered to life, illuminating the concrete floor stained with grease, piles of junk Bob's broken lawnmowers. Sylvia's hoarded magazines from the 90s created a claustrophobic maze. I cleared a small space in the corner, shoving aside a stack of bald tires. My hands were numb. I needed to check my emails. I needed a win. Earlier that week, I had finalized the blueprints for the Sterling Heights Library renovation. It was my design, my concept. I had spent 3 months losing sleep over those elevations. I reached for my laptop bag, which I had left on the kitchen counter before my trip. Wait, I had left it in my room. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my numbness. I ran back to the house, bursting through the back door. I ignored Sylvia's gasp and marched straight up the stairs to my room. The door was locked. Preston. I pounded on the wood. Open this door. A muffled groan answered me. Then the lock clicked. Preston stood there, wearing nothing but boxer shorts, his eyes red-rimmed and glassy. The room, my sanctuary, reeked of stale beer and marijuana. My bed was stripped of its sheets, a tangled nest of dirty blankets in its place. Chill, Glow, he slurred, scratching his stomach, trying to conceptualize here. Where is my laptop? I demanded, pushing past him. The silver MacBook. It was on the desk. The desk was empty. My drafting table was covered in pizza boxes. Oh, that, Preston yawned, leaning against the doorframe. I needed some liquidity, seed capital. You know how it is. It takes money to make money. The world tilted on its axis. You sold it. Pawned it, he corrected, sounding offended. I will get it back when my parlay hits. There is a game tonight in Vegas. Sure thing. I felt the blood drain from my face. Preston, my entire portfolio was on that drive. The Sterling Heights project. The backups were on the cloud. But the login... You can buy another one. He dismissed me, waving his hand. You are a rich architect, right? Stop stressing me out. Bad vibes are bad for business. He slammed the door in my face. I stood there, staring at the wood grain. My hand raised to knock again, but my strength simply evaporated. It wasn't just the laptop, it was the message. I did not exist to them as a person. I was a resource, a bank account with a heartbeat. I went to work the next morning wearing wrinkled clothes I had dried over a space heater. I walked into Apex Horizon ready to beg IT to help me recover my files remotely. But as I walked past the conference room, I froze. My boss, a man whose only talent was failing upwards, stood at the head of the table. Projected on the screen behind him were my designs, my library, my vision. And here, he was saying to the board of directors, gesturing with a laser pointer, is where I really pushed the envelope with the natural lighting. It came to me in a dream, really. The room applauded. I stood on the other side of the glass, invisible. I couldn't even prove it was mine. Preston had sold the proof for a few $100s to bet on a basketball game. I walked to my cubicle, packed my personal items into a small box, and sat there until security came to escort me out. I hadn't been fired, but I knew it was coming. I had missed the deadline because I had no computer, and my boss had stolen the work anyway. That night, I returned to the garage. I didn't go into the main house. I didn't eat dinner. I arranged 2 shipping pallets on the concrete floor to keep my mattress off the cold ground. I hung a tarp up to block the draft coming from the garage door. I lay down in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside. I was 29 years old. I was an award-winning student, a licensed architect, and a dutiful daughter. And I was sleeping in a garage next to a rusty lawnmower while my brother slept in my bed and my boss accepted an award for my work. I stared up at the spider webs dancing in the rafters. Tears leaked from the corners of my eyes. Hot tracks running into my ears. I thought this was the bottom. I thought I had nothing left to lose. I closed my eyes, praying for sleep, unaware that in the shadows behind a stack of rotting cardboard boxes, a pair of eyes was watching me. I was not alone in the dark. The darkness in the garage was heavy, pressing against my chest like a physical weight. The temperature had dropped significantly since I had extinguished the single light bulb. Turning my breath into invisible clouds of ice, I lay rigid on my makeshift bed of pallets, listening to the wind batter the metal door. It rattled in its frame, a metallic groan that masked the other sound I was trying desperately to ignore. It was a scratching noise, dry and rhythmic. It came from the far corner. Behind a wall of cardboard boxes my mother had stacked floor to ceiling years ago, her archive of precious memories that were mostly just tax returns from 1998 and broken kitchen appliances. I pulled the thin wool blanket tighter around my shoulders, my heart hammering against my ribs, my mind, exhausted and fraying at the edges, conjured images of the massive rats that sometimes scurried through the drainage pipes of our neighborhood. Or perhaps a raccoon had clawed its way in through the rot in the eaves. Scritch, scratch. It stopped, then a soft thud, like something small toppling over. I could not sleep with a rodent staring at me. I sat up, the cold air biting through my sweater instantly. My hand fumbled in the dark until my fingers closed around the cold aluminum of a heavy-duty flashlight I had salvaged from a tool chest earlier. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for a confrontation with a possum, and clicked the beam on. The shaft of white light cut through the gloom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the freezing air. I swept the beam across the oil-stained floor, past the rusty lawnmower, past the tower of bald tires, until it landed on the gap between two refrigerator boxes. "Get out," I warned, my voice raspy and trembling. "Go on, shoo." Nothing moved. I swung my legs off the pallets and stood up. My boots crunched on grit as I took a step forward, raising the flashlight like a weapon. "I am not in the mood for this," I hissed at the shadows. "I will call animal control." I kicked the bottom box. A gasp echoed in the silence. It was not the chitter of an animal. It was a human sound. Sharp, terrified, and undeniably human. I froze. The flashlight beam wavered, then steadied as I aimed it directly into the crevice behind the boxes. Two wide eyes stared back at me. They were a piercing, crystalline blue, so bright they seemed to glow in the harsh light, but they were filled with a terror so profound it made my stomach lurch. The eyes belonged to a child, a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, curled into a tight ball amidst the dust bunnies and spider webs. I lowered the light slightly so as not to blind her. She was a wreck. Her face was smeared with grime and soot, her hair a tangled mat of blonde knots. She was wearing a coat that was clearly scavenged, a dark wool trench coat that was 5 sizes too big, the sleeves rolled up into thick cuffs that swallowed her tiny hands. She was shaking violently, her teeth chattering with a sound like dice rattling in a cup. "Hey," I whispered, the aggression draining out of me instantly. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the pain of the concrete against my joints. "It is okay. I am not going to hurt you." She flinched as if I had struck her. She scrambled backward, pressing her spine against the damp wall of the garage. In her arms, she clutched a plush rabbit. It was filthy. Its white fur turned gray, and one of its long floppy ears had been torn off, leaving ragged stitching exposed. She squeezed the toy so hard her knuckles were white. "I am Gloria," I said softly, keeping my distance. "Did you come in here to get out of the storm?" She did not speak. She just watched me, tracking my every movement with the intensity of a cornered prey animal. I looked at her more closely. The coat was dirty. Yes, but as the light caught the fabric, I noticed something. It was not the coarse polyester blend of a thrift store find. It was heavy, structured wool, and underneath the coat, I caught a glimpse of a dress with a lace collar. The lace was torn, but the pattern was intricate. "You must be freezing," I said. I remembered the can of chicken noodle soup I had heated on a hot plate earlier, but had been too nauseous to eat. It was sitting on a workbench, covered with a paper plate. It would be cold now, a gelatinous mess, but it was food. I moved slowly, telegraphing my actions. "I have food. Are you hungry?" The mention of food broke her paralysis. Her gaze darted to the workbench, then back to me. A primal hunger flashed across her face, overriding the fear for a split second. I retrieved the bowl and a spoon. I slid it across the floor toward her. like an offering to a wild dog. Go ahead. It is safe. She hesitated, then lunged. She grabbed the bowl with shaking hands. I expected her to shovel the food into her mouth with her fingers, to slurp and spill like any starving child would. But she didn't. She picked up the spoon. Despite her trembling, she held the utensil correctly. Her pinky finger slightly elevated, she brought the spoon to her mouth, swallowed, and dabbed the corner of her lips with the back of her hand before taking the next bite. It was a small gesture, ingrained and automatic. Someone had taught this child table manners. Someone had taught her discipline. This was not a child who had been on the streets her whole life. I scooted a little closer. The light revealed a dark purple bruise blooming on her wrist, just below the cuff of the oversized coat. My breath hitched. It was the distinct shape of fingers, a grip mark. "Who did that to you?" I asked, pointing gently. She yanked her sleeve down, hiding the mark, and stopped eating. The fear returned, shutting down her face like a slam of a door. She shook her head frantically. My mind raced. If I called the police, they would take her. They would put her in the system. I knew the local foster care statistics. I knew the horror stories. If she was running from an abusive home, sending her back or putting her in a group home might be a death sentence. And looking at the terror in her eyes, I knew she would run the moment she heard sirens. "Okay," I said, raising my hands in surrender. "No questions. You do not have to talk, but you cannot sleep on the floor. It is too cold." I pointed to my pallets. "I have extra blankets. You can stay here, just for tonight." She stared at me, calculating. Then, slowly, she nodded. We did not speak much after that. I set her up on the corner of the mattress, giving her the thicker comforter. She curled up instantly, facing the wall, the one-eared rabbit tucked under her chin. "I need to call you something," I whispered into the dark after I turned off the flashlight. "You are quiet as a mouse. I think I will call you Minnie." There was a long pause. I thought she was asleep. "Okay," a tiny voice whispered back. It was raspy, unused. I lay awake for hours, listening to her breathing even out. My own problems, the lost job, the stolen laptop, the betrayal felt distant, replaced by a sudden, fierce protectiveness over this stranger. Morning came too fast. The gray light of dawn was just starting to bleed through the cracks in the garage door when I heard the sound of the back door of the main house slamming shut. Heavy footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway. "Gloria." Preston's voice boomed, closer than I expected. "Hey, sis, wakey, wakey." My heart stopped. I scrambled up, looking at Minnie. She was already awake, sitting bolt upright, eyes wide with panic. "Hide," I mouthed. Preston was fumbling with the keypad of the garage door. He had forgotten the code years ago, but the side door, the one I used, was only secured by a simple latch. The handle jiggled. "Come on. Glow," Preston shouted. "I know you're in there. Mom said there were some old golf clubs in here. I need to liquidate some assets." I scanned the room. There was nowhere. The pallets were too low. The boxes were too full. Then I saw it. The old cedar wardrobe in the back corner. It was a massive, moth-eaten antique that weighed a ton. "Quick!" I grabbed Minnie's hand. She was light as a feather. I pulled her toward the wardrobe. "Get in. Do not make a sound. No matter what you hear. Do not make a sound." I opened the heavy door. The smell of cedar chips and decay wafted out. Minnie scrambled inside, pulling her knees to her chest among the hanging garment bags of old winter coats. "Please," she whispered, her eyes locking onto mine. I shut the wardrobe door, just as the side door of the garage burst open. Preston stood there, framed by the morning light. He looked disheveled, wearing a silk robe over sweatpants. He sniffed the air, wrinkling his nose. "Jesus, Gloria," he laughed, stepping inside. "It smells like a hamster cage in here. Living the dream, huh?" He began kicking at the piles of junk, his eyes scanning for anything of value. He was walking straight toward the wardrobe. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. If he opened that door, if he saw her, everything was over. "What do you want, Preston?" I stepped into his path. trying to keep my voice steady. "Golf clubs," he said, trying to look over my shoulder. "Titanium drivers. Dad had a set. They hold value." He took another step. He was 3 feet from the wardrobe. "Move aside, sis. I bet they are in that old closet." I planted my feet. "There is nothing in there but Mom's old fur coats. The moths ate them years ago." Preston narrowed his eyes. "You are acting weird. Weirder than usual." He reached out a hand to shove me aside. I held my breath, my hand twitching, ready to strike my own brother if his hand touched that handle. The air in the garage crackled with sudden violence. Over the next few days, the garage ceased to be a cold storage unit for broken dreams and became a fortress for two, after the terrifying close call with Preston. Minnie and I developed a silent rhythm, a dance of survival performed on the grease-stained concrete. We were two castaways on an island of asphalt, surrounded by a shark-infested ocean that just happened to be my family. Minnie was not like any child I had ever met. Once the initial shock of her discovery faded, she did not cry or complain about the cold. Instead, she became my shadow. While I was frantically searching for freelance drafting gigs on my phone at the local coffee shop, she would stay hidden. But when I returned, the garage would be transformed. She organized the chaos. She stacked the old newspapers into neat insulation bricks against the drafty walls. She swept the dust into tidy piles. She even arranged some rusty gears and spark plugs on an upturned crate to look like a vase of flowers. It was heartbreakingly domestic. She was trying to pay her rent in the only way a 6-year-old knew how. One evening, under the dim light of the single bulb, I was reviewing a set of rejected blueprints I had brought home from Apex Horizon weeks ago. I was trying to find a flaw, a reason why they had been dismissed, hoping to salvage something for a portfolio. Minnie crept up beside me, her small chin resting on my shoulder. She smelled of the lavender soap I had stolen from the main bathroom for her. "The load is wrong," she whispered. I blinked, turning to look at her. "What did you say?" She pointed a grime-streaked finger at the structural support column on the drawing of the atrium. "The load distribution, if you use steel there. The tension ratio is too high for the glass. It will crack in winter." I stared at her, then back at the drawing. I grabbed my calculator. I ran the numbers. She was right. The thermal expansion coefficient I had used was for standard steel, not the reinforced alloy specified in the notes. It was a mistake a junior engineer might make, but I had missed it. A child who looked like she belonged on a milk carton had just corrected a structural engineering error in 10 seconds. "Minnie," I asked, my voice trembling slightly, "who taught you that?" She pulled her hand back as if she had been burned. The curtain of fear dropped over her eyes again. "Building blocks," she muttered, retreating to her corner. "Just building blocks." But I knew it was more than blocks. She had been educated, groomed for something. The reality of our situation, however, was less about genius and more about survival. My bank account was bleeding out. Preston's gambling debts had apparently migrated from manageable to critical, and the atmosphere in the main house was toxic. Sylvia cornered me every morning before I could slip away, demanding my contribution to the household. She claimed Preston needed organic supplements for his brain function. But I knew the money was going straight to the bookies. I was skipping meals to buy food for Minnie. I learned which convenience stores threw away their sandwiches at 11 at night. I learned to eat the crusts while Minnie ate the soft centers. Then the fever hit. It started with a cough that rattled in Minnie's small chest like loose gravel. By midnight, she was burning up. Her skin was dry and hot like parchment paper left in an oven. She tossed and turned on the pallets, whimpering in her sleep. I counted the crumpled bills in my wallet. $42. That was it. That was everything I had left in the world. Sylvia had demanded $50 for the electric bill that morning. She had threatened to evict me if I didn't pay up. "We are not running a charity, Gloria," she had said, adjusting her pearl necklace. I looked at Minnie's flushed face, at the way her brow furrowed in pain. There was no choice. There was never really a choice. I ran to the 24-hour pharmacy 3 blocks away. I bought the best pediatric fever reducer they had, a bottle of electrolyte water, and a thermometer. It cost me $38. When I got back, I managed to get the medicine down Minnie's throat. She swallowed it obediently, her eyes glassy and unfocused. I sat with her, stroking her matted hair, whispering that everything would be all right. Then, with a loud clack, the world went black. The single light bulb above us died. The hum of the small space heater I had been running, the one thing keeping us from freezing to death, cut out. The silence that followed was deafening. I stumbled to the door and looked toward the main house. The lights in the living room were blazing. The television was on. I could see Sylvia's silhouette moving in the kitchen. She hadn't lost power. She had cut the line to the garage. It was a punishment, a petty, cruel, vindictive punishment for not giving her the money she wanted. She knew I was out there in the freezing cold. She just didn't care. "Mom," I whispered into the dark, the word tasting like bile. "How could you—" The temperature began to drop immediately. I fumbled back to the pallets in the pitch blackness. I gathered every blanket, every old coat, every scrap of fabric I could find and piled them on top of Minnie. I crawled in beside her, wrapping my body around hers to share my warmth. She was delirious now. The fever was peaking. She thrashed against me, muttering things that made no sense. "No, Uncle," she whimpered, her voice thin and terrified. "I don't want to go on the boat. It's too dark." "Shh, I've got you," I soothed, rubbing her back. "He smells like smoke," she gasped, clutching my sweater. "Cigars, and the flower water, the expensive kind. Don't let him find me. He said I fell. He said nobody would look." My blood ran cold, colder than the air in the garage. Cigars and expensive cologne. A boat. This wasn't a child's nightmare. This was a memory. I held her tighter, staring into the abyss of the garage, realizing that the monster chasing this little girl was very real, and he was likely powerful enough to crush us both. The next morning, Minnie's fever had broken, but she was weak. I left her with a bottle of water and the last of the crackers, promising to be back in an hour. I had to go to Apex Horizon. I hadn't received my final paycheck, and I needed that money to turn the power back on before we froze to death. I walked into the lobby of the glass and steel building that used to be my second home. I felt small, dirty, and desperate. Gloria. I turned to see the receptionist, a kind woman named Sarah, looking at me with pity. But before she could speak, the elevator doors pinged open. Preston strode out. He wasn't supposed to be there, but there he was, wearing one of his flashy, ill-fitting suits, his face flushed with manic energy. He was screaming at a security guard. "I am her financial manager," Preston yelled, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "She owes me that money. You people are withholding assets." "Preston," I shouted, running toward him. "What are you doing?" He spun around, his eyes wild. "There she is. The squatter. Tell them. Gloria. Tell them to cut the check to me. I need to settle the account." "Sir, you need to leave," the guard said, reaching for Preston's arm. Preston shoved the guard. It was a weak shove, but it was enough. Chaos erupted. 2 more guards tackled him. He was screaming profanities, calling me a thief, a loser, a disgrace to the family. Every head in the lobby turned. My former colleagues, people I had shared lunches with, people who respected me, stared in horror. Then I saw my boss standing on the mezzanine level, looking down with a sneer. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked relieved. He finally had a reason to cut ties completely. "Get them both out of here," he ordered, "and ban Miss Fairbanks from the premises. We cannot have this kind of liability." "But I didn't do anything," I cried out, but the words were lost in the commotion. They threw us out, literally. I stumbled onto the sidewalk, my knees scraping the concrete. Preston dusted himself off, glared at me, and spat on the ground. "You are useless, Gloria," he hissed. "You can't even get paid right." He turned and walked away, leaving me there with nothing, no job, no check, no dignity. I walked back to the garage in a daze. The walk took 2 hours. I didn't feel my feet. I didn't feel the wind. I felt hollowed out, like a pumpkin carved for Halloween and left to rot. I crawled back into the dark, freezing garage. Minnie was sitting up, wrapped in the blankets, waiting for me. I collapsed onto the pallets. The tears finally came. Not the polite, silent tears of the past few years, but ugly, heaving sobs that tore at my throat. I had failed. I was dragging this innocent child down into the gutter with me. I couldn't feed her. I couldn't keep her warm. I was worthless, just like my mother said, just like the shadow I was born to be. "I'm sorry," I choked out, covering my face with my hands. "I'm so sorry. Minnie, I can't do this. I'm nobody." A small, cool hand touched my wet cheek. I froze. I looked up through my tears. Minnie had crawled out of her nest of blankets. She was shivering. But her eyes were clear. For the first time since I found her, the fear was gone from her gaze. It was replaced by a fierce, ancient wisdom that seemed too big for her tiny body. She took my hand in both of hers and squeezed. "Do not cry," she said, her voice steady and sure. "You are not nobody. You shared your soup. You gave me your bed. You kept the bad dreams away." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against mine. "You are the best person in the world, Gloria." In that dark, freezing hellhole, with the smell of gasoline and despair thick in the air, those words hit me harder than any blow. They were the first kind words anyone had spoken to me in years, and in the reflection of her blue eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a shadow. I saw a guardian. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I wasn't going to let them win. Not while this little girl believed in me. Life became a series of jagged edges and sharp corners after the incident at Apex Horizon. I had ceased to be Gloria Fairbanks, the rising architect, and had become a ghost haunting the alleyways of Ironhaven. My days were measured in aluminum and glass. I spent the daylight hours scouring the industrial district for recyclable cans, calculating the yield like I used to calculate load-bearing walls. 5 cents a can. 20 cans made $1. $1 bought 2-day-old bagels. It was a brutal, simple mathematics that left no room for pride. Minnie was my silent partner in this degradation. She was too small to carry the bags, so I made her stay in the shadows, hidden behind dumpsters or parked cars while I dug through the refuse of strangers. I had found a diner on 4th Street where the owner, a grease-stained man named Sal, let me wash dishes during the lunch rush for $20 under the table. It was illegal, it was backbreaking, and it was the only thing keeping us from starving. One evening, the wind was particularly cruel, whipping through my thin coat as we walked back toward the garage. My hands were raw and red from the scalding dishwater, and my pockets were heavy with the weight of $12.40, our fortune for the day. Minnie trotted beside me, her hand gripping the hem of my jacket. She was wearing a woolen hat I had found in a donation bin, pulled low over her ears. We passed an appliance store on Main Street. The entire front window was a wall of flickering screens, all tuned to the same news channel. Usually, I walked past with my head down, avoiding the blue glare that reminded me of the world I had lost. But tonight, the sheer size of the image on the central 80-inch screen stopped me cold. It was a live press conference. A man stood at a podium, bathed in the harsh flashes of camera strobes. He looked like a ruin of a human being. His suit was impeccable, tailored and expensive, but it hung on his frame as if he had shrunk inside it. His skin was gray, his eyes hollowed out by a grief so profound it seemed to suck the light out of the room. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Silas Thorne. Increases reward for information on missing heiress to $5 million. I knew who Silas Thorne was. Everyone did. He was the titan of green energy, the man who had revolutionized solar storage. He was a legend. But looking at him now, he just looked like a dying man. "Please," Silas rasped on the screen, his voice cracking. "It has been 6 months. I just want to know. If anyone saw anything near the marina that night, please." I felt Minnie stiffen beside me. Her grip on my jacket tightened until it was painful. "Come on. Minnie, I said, gently trying to pull her away. It is just the news. Let's go home. She did not move. Her feet were planted on the pavement as if they had taken root. She was staring up at the giant screen, her small body trembling violently. The hat had slipped back slightly, revealing those terrified blue eyes, the same eyes that were currently staring out from a smaller inset photo on the television screen next to the word missing. The photo on the TV showed a girl with polished curls, wearing a velvet dress and a smile that radiated innocence. The girl beside me was filthy, smelling of dish soap and old rain, wearing rags, but the eyes were identical. Minnie raised a shaking hand and pointed at the weeping billionaire. "That is my grandfather," she whispered. The street noise seemed to vanish, the honking cars, the distant sirens. The wind, it all fell away, leaving only the thudding of my own heart. "What did you say?" I breathed, kneeling down on the wet sidewalk to look her in the face. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes locked on the screen. "That is Grandfather Silas. He looks so sad. He thinks I'm gone." I looked back at the screen. Seraphina Thorne, presumed dead, lost at sea. My mind reeled, spinning through the implications like a hard drive trying to process a corrupted file. I was hiding a billionaire heiress in a garage behind a stack of old tires. The little girl I had been feeding crusts of bread was worth billions of dollars. "Minnie," I said, my voice shaking, "you are Seraphina." She nodded slowly, then she leaned in close, her breath hitching. "He wants you." I frowned, confused. "He doesn't know me, honey." "No," she insisted, her voice gaining a frantic edge. "He is looking for someone brave. He told me once. He said if I was ever in trouble, I had to find a helper. You are the helper." On the screen, the camera panned to a man standing just behind Silas Thorne. He was younger, handsome in a sharp, predatory way, with slicked-back hair and a face that practiced sympathy in a mirror. The caption identified him as Julian Sterling, CFO of Thorne Dynamics. Minnie gasped. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. She recoiled, burying her face in my chest. "Him," she whimpered. "It is him. Hide me. Gloria, please." I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the street, from the screen, from the world. "Who is he? Minnie? Who is Julian?" "Uncle Julian," she sobbed into my coat. "He said we were playing a game, on the big boat. He said we were going to test the little boat, the yellow one with the cover. The lifeboat. He put me inside." Her voice was muffled, terrified. "He gave me my rabbit. Then he used his knife. He cut the ropes. He didn't lower it. Gloria. He pushed it. He pushed me into the dark water. He smiled. He was smoking his cigar and he smiled and waved goodbye." I felt the blood drain from my face. The news reports had called it a tragic accident, a child falling overboard during a storm. But Seraphina was saying she had been cast adrift, deliberately. "The boat was broken," she continued, her voice trembling. "Water came in. I floated for a long time. Then the river took me to the mud. I walked and walked." I looked up at the screen again. Julian Sterling had his hand on Silas Thorne's shoulder. He looked like the picture of a supportive executive, a grieving family friend, but I saw the way his hand gripped the old man's shoulder. It wasn't a comfort. It was a claim. If Seraphina was dead, who inherited the empire Silas had no other children? His son, Seraphina's father, had died years ago. If the granddaughter was out of the picture, the control of Thorne Dynamics would likely fall to the next in line, the chief financial officer, the man managing the trust. Julian Sterling. I realized with a jolt of nausea that I was not just sheltering a lost child. I was hiding a target, and the man hunting her was not some street thug or angry parent. He was a monster in a $3,000 suit who had tried to drown a 6-year-old girl to steal a fortune. "We have to go to the police," I said, my first instinct kicking in. "We have to tell them." Minnie shook her head violently, pulling back to look at me. "No, Uncle Julian has friends. The policeman on the boat, They laughed with him. They drank the yellow drink with him. If you take me to the Blue Men, he will find me. He will finish it. I froze. Of course, a man like Julian Sterling didn't get his hands dirty without insurance. He would have connections. He would have bought silence. If I walked into a precinct with a homeless-looking child claiming to be the dead Thorne heiress, they would call social services, or worse. They would call Thorne Dynamics. They would call Julian. And that would be the end of us. I looked at the image of Silas Thorne again. He was the only wild card. He was desperate. He was offering $5 million just for a clue. He loved this girl. I could see it in the way his hands shook on the podium. Julian had isolated him. Julian was controlling the narrative, feeding the old man lies about accidental drowning while likely hunting for the body to confirm his victory. We couldn't trust the system. The system was broken. I knew that better than anyone after what my own family and company had done to me. We could only trust the truth. I stood up, pulling Minnie Serafina close to my side. I adjusted her hat, pulling it down until only her nose was visible. "Okay," I said, my voice hardening. "No police. You are right. It is too dangerous." "What do we do?" she asked, trusting me with a simplicity that broke my heart. "We go to the top," I said, looking at the freezing city skyline where the Thorne Tower pierced the clouds like a needle. "We are going to tell your grandfather ourselves, and we are going to make sure Uncle Julian never smiles again." I grabbed her hand. We didn't walk back to the garage like victims that night. We walked with a mission. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting a war. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who the enemy was. The view from the 42nd floor of the Thorne Dynamics Tower usually offered a sense of godlike detachment, but for Julian Sterling, it currently offered nothing but nausea. The city lights below were not jewels. They were interrogators, each one asking the same question he had been asking himself for 6 months. Where was the body? Julian swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, but he did not drink. He turned away from the window to face the bank of monitors embedded in the mahogany wall of his office. He had spent a fortune money siphoned from the very accounts he was entrusted to protect on a network of private investigators and cleanup crews. They were the best in the business, men with no names and even fewer morals. Yet they had found nothing. Nobody washed up in the reeds. No shred of a velvet dress snagged on a driftwood log. "She is dead," Julian whispered to the empty room, trying to force the universe to align with his ambition. "She has to be dead." But the silence of the room argued back. If she was dead, the river would have given her up. Physics demanded it. The fact that Serafina Thorne had vanished into the ether was a statistical anomaly that made the hair on the back of Julian's neck stand up. He was the heir apparent, the man who would turn Silas Thorne's green energy empire into a global monopoly. But he could not claim the throne while the ghost of a 6-year-old girl stood in his way. He tapped a command on his tablet, his custom-built artificial intelligence, a program designed to scrub the internet for any mention of the Thorne heiress. Was running a new algorithm. It was not looking for faces anymore. Facial recognition was useless on a bloated corpse or a child hiding in filth. It was looking for artifacts. Specifically, the items listed in the police report as being on her person at the time of the accident. A soft chime echoed through the office. On the central screen, a red box appeared, framing a grainy image. Julian stepped closer, his breath hitching. It was a photograph from a low-tier marketplace app, something used by the lower class to barter their junk. The listing was titled, "Vintage Luxury Plush Toy, Real Gold Stitching, High-End Condition, $200 or Best Offer." It was the rabbit. The white fur was stained gray, and the ear was missing, torn off during the struggle on the boat when he had snatched her up, but the embroidery on the foot was unmistakable. S. Serafina Thorne. Julian zoomed in on the background of the photo. It was taken on a dirty bedspread in a room with peeling paint. He checked the geotag metadata embedded in the upload. Iron Haven District. Residential IP. A slow reptilian smile spread across Julian's face. She was alive. and some idiot had just dangled her bait right in front of the shark. He picked up his encrypted phone and dialed a number that did not exist in any directory. "I have a location," Julian said, his voice smooth and deadly. "No police, no witnesses. Burn it to the ground if you have to." 3 hours earlier, Preston Fairbanks had felt like a genius. He had waited until Gloria left for her humiliating dishwashing job to sneak back into the garage. He wasn't looking for golf clubs this time. He was looking for leverage. He knew Gloria was hiding something, the way she guarded that garage. The way she hurried back with food she couldn't afford, it all pointed to a secret. He had rummaged through the makeshift nest of blankets in the corner, kicking aside the pathetic little drawings the brat had made. That was when he found it. The rabbit. Preston might have been a gambling addict and a failure, but he knew quality when he felt it. The fabric was cashmere, not polyester, and the stitching on the foot. He scratched it with his thumbnail. It was soft, malleable, gold, actual gold thread. "Jackpot," Preston muttered, holding the toy up to the dusty light. He didn't care about the kid. He didn't care about Gloria. He saw a quick influx of cash to keep the loan sharks from breaking his kneecaps. He snapped 3 photos with his phone, filtered them to hide the grime, and uploaded them to every local selling group he knew. He was sitting in the living room, watching television and waiting for the bids to roll in. When the doorbell rang, it wasn't the pizza delivery he was hoping for. 2 men stood on the porch. They were built like vending machines, wide and blocky, wearing leather jackets that creaked when they moved. They didn't smile. "Preston Fairbanks," the one on the left asked. His voice sounded like gravel in a blender. Preston swallowed hard, his bravado vanishing instantly. "Look, guys, tell Rocco I am good for it. I have a sale pending right now. Big money. I just need another 24 hours. The man on the right pushed past Preston, stepping into the hallway without an invitation. He looked around with a sneer of disgust. "We are not with Rocco. We are interested in the merchandise." He held up the phone. On the screen was the picture of the rabbit Preston had posted 40 minutes ago. "Oh," Preston let out a shaky breath, a nervous grin plastering itself onto his face. "The vintage toy, you guys are collectors. I didn't know the market was this hot. I have another offer for 300, but if you can match." The man grabbed Preston by the throat and slammed him against the wall. The family photos rattled on their hooks. "Where is the girl?" the man hissed, his face inches from Preston's. "The girl who owns the rabbit. Where is she?" Preston's brain, usually slow and fogged by cheap beer, suddenly fired with the clarity of a desperate rat. They weren't collectors. They were looking for the kid, and they looked rich, or at least, they worked for someone rich. Gloria, that sneaky, self-righteous witch. She wasn't running a charity. She was hoarding a gold mine. She must have kidnapped some rich kid and was waiting for a payout, cutting her own brother out of the deal. "The garage," Preston choked out, his eyes bulging. "She keeps her in the garage. My sister. She is the one. I just found the toy." The man released him. Preston slid to the floor, coughing. "If she is not there," the man said, adjusting his cuffs, "we will come back for you." They turned and walked back to their black SUV parked down the street, clearly waiting for nightfall or orders. Preston rubbed his neck. A dark, ugly plan began to form in his mind. If these guys wanted the girl, how much was she worth? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. If he handed her over to Gloria, he got nothing. But if he took the girl himself, if he was the one to deliver her to these interested parties. He scrambled to his feet. He needed to get to the garage before Gloria came back. But Gloria was already back. I had returned early from the diner because the owner had run out of detergent. I had come in through the back alley, avoiding the front of the house. I had seen the black SUV parked 2 houses down. I had seen the men on the porch. I was crouching behind the rain barrel near the garage window, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I watched through the dirty glass as Preston paced back and forth in the kitchen, rubbing his neck and checking his watch. He had a look on his face I had never seen before. It wasn't just his usual incompetence. It was malice. Pure, greedy malice. He picked up a crowbar from the utility closet. "Oh, God," I whispered. I slipped into the garage. Serafina was sitting on the pallets, reading an old architectural magazine I had saved. She looked up, smiling when she saw me. But the smile died instantly when she saw my face. "We have to go," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Now, leave everything." "The rabbit?" she asked, looking around. "Preston took it," I said, realizing with a sick jolt why the men were outside. "He must have posted it. They found us. Minnie, Julian found us." She went pale, her small body trembling. I didn't give her time to panic. I grabbed her hand and my backpack, which contained only a flashlight and a bottle of water. "To the car," I ordered. My car, an ancient sedan that had been resting on cinder blocks in the driveway for 2 years, was my only hope. I had been fixing it in secret. Using parts scavenged from the junkyard, I prayed the battery had enough charge. We burst out of the garage side door. The cold night air hit us like a slap. I dragged Serafina toward the car, fumbling for the keys. Gloria. The shriek came from the back porch. Sylvia stood there, wrapped in her bathrobe, a cigarette dangling from her lips. She looked like a vengeful gargoyle. "Where do you think you are going?" she screamed, marching down the steps. "Mom, get out of the way," I yelled, throwing Serafina into the passenger seat. Sylvia grabbed the driver's side door, preventing me from closing it. "You are not going anywhere until you pay me for the back rent. And Preston said you stole his vintage collectible. You ungrateful little thief." "Mom, listen to me," I pleaded. Starting the engine, it sputtered and coughed. "There are men watching the house. They are going to kill us. Let go." "Don't you dare lie to me," Sylvia shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet neighborhood. "You are just trying to run away from your responsibilities, Bob. Come out here. She is stealing the car." Her screaming was a beacon. Down the street, the headlights of the black SUV flared to life. Tires squealed against the pavement. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw nothing but a stranger consumed by her own pettiness. She would sell me out for a $50 utility bill. She was blocking my escape while killers raced toward us. "I am sorry, Mom," I said, tears stinging my eyes. "But I am done paying for you." I slammed the car into reverse. The open door caught Sylvia's hip, knocking her into the snowbank. She screamed, more in shock than pain. But I didn't stop. The SUV was roaring down the street, closing the distance fast. I stomped on the accelerator, the old engine screaming in protest, and swung the car around, tearing up the lawn my mother loved more than she loved me. We were running for our lives, and the hunt had officially begun. The black SUV swerved across the lawn, its high beams blinding me, cutting off my escape route before I could even reach the street. My tires spun uselessly on the frozen grass. I cursed, slamming the gear shift into reverse. There was only one place left to go. I backed the car violently into the garage, the rear bumper kissing the back wall with a sickening crunch. I didn't kill the engine. I leaped out, slapped the manual override on the heavy steel door, and watched it rattle down, sealing us in just as 2 heavy boots slammed against the metal from the outside. I locked it. It was a flimsy defense, but it bought us seconds. Inside the car, Serafina was hyperventilating, her small hands clutching the dashboard. "Stay down," I ordered, my voice sounding unrecognizable to my own ears. Through the thin drywall connecting the garage to the house, I heard the front door crash open. Then came the voice that severed the last thread of my hesitation. "In there," Preston shrieked. It wasn't a cry for help. It was an eager, pathetic plea for approval. "My sister is in the garage. She has a girl I told you I would deliver." He had sold us out, not for safety, but for the hope of a scrap from the table. "Open it or we burn it down," a deep voice bellowed from the other side of the interior door. The doorknob rattled violently, the wood splintering under a heavy kick. I looked at the main garage door, the one I had just closed. It was reinforced steel, but the tracks were rusted. Then I looked at the side wall of the garage. It was shared with Sylvia's storage annex, a flimsy wooden extension where she kept 30 years of hoarding. "Put your seatbelt on," I told Serafina. "What are you doing?" she squeaked. "We are making a new door." I revved the engine. The old sedan roared, a beast waking up from a long coma. I didn't aim for the steel door where the SUV was waiting. I aimed for the wooden partition. I floored the accelerator. The impact was deafening. We smashed through the drywall, plowing through stacks of old National Geographic magazines, shattering porcelain dolls, and flattening a mountain of Tupperware. The car bucked and shuddered, debris raining down on the windshield. But we kept moving. We burst through the rotten outer wall of the annex and landed with a heavy thud in the neighbor's side yard. I didn't stop to assess the damage. I spun the wheel hard to the left, tearing through the neighbor's prize-winning hydrangeas, and fishtailed onto the icy pavement of the back alley. Behind us, I saw the men running out of my garage, guns drawn, but they were too late. I was already doing 40 miles per hour down the narrow lane. "Are you okay?" I shouted over the roar of the engine and the wind whistling through a cracked side window. Serafina nodded, her eyes wide. "You drive like a race car driver." "I used to be," I muttered, gritting my teeth. "Before life got in the way." The chase was not over. As we merged onto the main avenue, headlights flashed in my rearview mirror. The black SUV was behind us, gaining ground. They had more horsepower, but I had something they didn't: rage, an intimate knowledge of Ironhaven's grid. I took a sharp right turn onto 4th Street, drifting the heavy sedan sideways. The tires screamed. The SUV followed, clipping a parked car. "Hold on," I yelled. I cut through the loading zone of the old textile factory, a shortcut I used to take when I delivered pizzas in college. The gap between the brick buildings was narrow, barely wide enough for a truck. My sedan scraped the walls, sparks flying, screeching like a banshee. The SUV was too wide. I saw it slam on its brakes in the mirror, forced to reverse and go around the block. That was my window. I killed the headlights and turned down a maze of residential streets, weaving left and right until the roar of the pursuing engine faded into the distance. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a jackhammer. "Where are we going?" Serafina asked softly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her trembling again. I didn't know. The garage was gone. My money was gone. We were fugitives. "I know a place," Serafina said suddenly. "Grandfather took me there. He said it was the only place where the world makes sense. It is quiet, and nobody goes there at night." "Where, Minnie?" "The Whispering Library," she said, "on the hill." The Sterling Heights Public Library. It was an ancient Gothic structure that had been underfunded for a decade. It was the very building I had designed the renovation plans for the plans Preston had sold. The irony was bitter, but she was right. It was secluded. We parked the battered car 3 blocks away, hidden under the low branches of an oak tree. We walked the rest of the way in the shadows. The library was closed, but I knew the building. I knew the service entrance lock was faulty because I had noted it in my initial inspection report. I used a credit card to shimmy the latch. It clicked open with a satisfying pop. We slipped inside. The smell of old paper and dust enveloped us. It was freezing, but it was safe. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice to a whisper. "We need information." I found the public computer terminal in the reference section. It was shut down, but I rebooted it. The screen cast a ghostly blue light on Serafina's face as she stood on a chair to watch. I typed Silas Thorne's schedule into the search bar. Hundreds of articles popped up about the search for the heiress, but I filtered for recent events. I found a press release from Thorne Dynamics, dated 2 hours ago. "Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, Silas Thorne will attend the groundbreaking ceremony for the Helios Tower downtown. He is expected to make a statement regarding the future of the company." "Tomorrow," I breathed. "That is it. That is our chance." If Silas was making a statement about the future, it meant Julian was pushing him to name a successor. We had to get to him before he signed anything, before he gave up hope. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The noise was so loud in the silent library that we both jumped. I looked at the screen. "Preston?" I should have ignored it, but a dark, cold curiosity took over. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. "You crazy witch!" Preston's voice exploded on the line. "You destroyed Mom's annex. Do you know how much that Hummel figurine collection was worth? You are in so much trouble. Gloria." "Is that all you have to say?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "You sold a child to killers. Preston, you told them where we were." "I was making a business deal," he sputtered. "And you ruined it. Those guys are furious. They said if I don't help them find you, they are going to break my legs. You need to come back. Gloria, bring the kid. Stop being selfish. Mom is crying. She's going to call the cops and report you for kidnapping if you don't bring that meal ticket back here in 1 hour." "Let her call," I said. "And Preston." "What?" "I hope they break both legs." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I popped the back case off. With a single, decisive motion, I snapped the SIM card in half. I dropped the pieces onto the dusty floor of the library. "Who was that?" Serafina asked, watching me with wide eyes. "Nobody," I said, reaching out to brush a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "Just a ghost. Come on, we need to rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." I pulled 2 cushions off the reading nook chairs and made a bed for us under the heavy oak desk. We were homeless, hunted, and alone, but as I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the little girl who held the fate of an empire in her hands, I felt strangely light. The heavy chains of my family, the guilt, the obligation, the desperate need for their approval were finally gone. They had burned up in the friction of my escape. I was free, and tomorrow I was going to war. The Bluebird Motor Inn was the kind of place where people went to disappear, or to die. The carpet was sticky, the wallpaper was peeling like sunburned skin, and the neon sign outside buzzed with a dying flicker that kept time with the pounding headache behind my eyes. I had spent our last $38 on a room for 6 hours. It was a calculated risk. We needed a shower. We needed rest. But mostly, I needed a workspace. I spread the motel stationery out on the stained bedspread. I did not have my drafting table or my CAD software, but I had something better. I had a photographic memory for structural schematics. The Helios Tower, the site of tomorrow's groundbreaking ceremony, was a project Apex Horizon had bid on and lost. I had studied the winning proposal's blueprints obsessively out of professional jealousy 2 years ago. Now, that obsession was our only lifeline. "The service elevators are here," I muttered, sketching a series of lines with a cheap ballpoint pen. "They run on a separate grid from the VIP lifts. Security will be focused on the atrium and the main stage." Serafina sat cross-legged at the foot of the bed, watching me. She was clean now. The grime of the garage washed away in the rusty shower. Her hair combed out. She looked less like a street urchin and more like the heiress she was, despite the oversized t-shirt she wore. "Can you get us to Grandpa?" she asked. "Getting to him is only half the problem." "Minnie," I said, tapping the pen against my chin. "The problem is what happens when we get there. Julian has had 6 months to poison his mind. If we just show up, Julian will claim you are an imposter, or that I kidnapped you to brainwash you. He has the power. We need proof, hard proof." Serafina frowned, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Proof like the book." I stopped drawing. I looked at her. "What book?" "The Black Book," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "The one Uncle Julian got mad about. I was drawing in his office. I found a book on the wall, behind the painting of the sad horse. It had numbers in it. I drew a flower on one of the pages. He grabbed my arm really hard. That was the day before the boat ride." My architect's brain snapped into high gear. A wall safe, hidden behind art, a ledger. It was a cliché because it was real. Men like Julian Sterling, men who embezzled and cheated, always kept receipts. They needed leverage against their partners. If Julian was cooking the books at Thorne Dynamics, that ledger was his insurance policy, and Serafina had seen it. That was why she had to die. She was a witness to his financial crimes before she was an obstacle to his inheritance. Do you remember which painting, Minnie? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline spiking in my veins. The one with the hunters, she said. In his office at the old building. The one with the big red chair. The old building, the Thorn Dynamics headquarters, it was connected to the new Helios Tower by a sky bridge. If the police raided Julian's office, they might find it, but we couldn't call the police. We had to expose him publicly. We needed to flush him out. Okay, I said, formulating a plan. We need to get into the event. We need to get close to your grandfather, but I cannot walk in there looking like a homeless woman. I need a badge. I need credibility. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Stay here, I told her. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. I have to go to work. I left Serafina with the remote control and a bag of vending machine chips. I drove the battered sedan to the industrial park where Apex Horizon was located. My heart was in my throat. This was breaking and entering. This was a felony. But after being hunted by hitmen, a little burglary felt like a walk in the park. I parked 3 blocks away and approached the rear entrance on foot. I knew the cleaning crew schedule. They took their smoke break at 2:15 near the loading dock. The door would be propped open with a brick. It was a security violation I had complained about for years. Tonight, I silently thanked them for their incompetence. I slipped inside while the janitors were laughing over a video on a phone. The office was dark, lit only by the green glow of exit signs. I moved like a ghost through the cubicle farm, the familiar smell of ozone and carpet cleaner making me nauseous. I reached the supply room. I didn't go to my old desk. I went to the printer hub. I logged in using the credentials of the intern who never changed his password. Guest 123. I pulled up the Helios Tower event layout from the public server and printed it on high-gloss paper. Then I opened the employee ID template. I scanned a photo of myself I had on my phone, a professional headshot from before my life fell apart. I typed in a fake name, Sarah Jenkins, event coordinator, Thorn Dynamics. I was laminating the badge when the lights flickered on. I froze. Gloria. I spun around, standing in the doorway, holding a mug of coffee, was Ben. He was a junior draftsman, a quiet guy who sat 2 rows behind me. He looked terrified. Ben, I said, holding my hands up, I am just leaving. He looked at the badge maker. He looked at the blueprints. He looked at me, dressed in dirty clothes, with dark circles under my eyes. The police were here yesterday, Ben said softly. Your brother came. He made a scene. He said you kidnapped a kid. He is lying, Ben, I said, looking him in the eye. My brother sold me out to the people who actually hurt that child. I am trying to save her. Ben hesitated. He was a good man, but he was timid. He looked at the phone on the wall. He could call security. It would be over in 2 minutes. The boss, Ben said, his voice hardening, took credit for the library designs. He got a bonus. He didn't even mention your name. I let out a bitter laugh. Sounds like him? Ben walked over to the printer. I tensed, ready to run. He picked up the fake badge I had just made. He inspected the lamination. The color balance is off, he said critically. Security will spot this a mile away. The Thorn Dynamics logo is a slightly darker shade of blue. He walked to his computer. He typed furiously for a minute, then hit print. He brought me a new badge. It was perfect. The lanyard is in the second drawer, Ben said, pointing. And take the back stairs. The camera in the stairwell has been broken for a week. Why? I asked, taking the badge. Because you were the only one who ever remembered my birthday, Ben said, turning back to his coffee. Go, give them hell. I made it back to the motel just as the sun was starting to bleed gray into the sky. Serafina was asleep, curled up with the remote. The TV was still on, muted. I sat on the edge of the bed and turned the volume up. It was the local morning news. Breaking news on the disappearance of Serafina Thorn, the anchor said. The screen cut to a shot of Julian Sterling standing at a podium. He looked somber, wearing a black ribbon on his lapel. It is with a heavy heart, Julian said, that we must accept the reality. My niece is gone. To honor her memory, I am establishing the Serafina Thorne Memorial Fund today. We must move forward. It was a masterstroke. By declaring a memorial, he was officially declaring her dead in the court of public opinion. He was closing the book. But first, the anchor continued, a plea from the family of the woman suspected of being involved in a related extortion scheme. My stomach dropped. The camera panned to my mother and Preston sitting on a couch. They were holding hands. Sylvia was dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. My daughter, Gloria, has always been troubled. Sylvia sobbed. She has delusions. She stole my car. She attacked me. And now she has taken care of a poor child. Gloria, if you are watching, please, let that baby go. Turn yourself in. Preston and I just want you to get help. Preston looked into the camera. His face bruised from where the hitmen must have roughed him up for losing us. Gloria, sis, don't make this worse. We love you. Just come home. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. They were painting me as a mentally unstable kidnapper to cover their own tracks and perhaps earn a reward from Julian. They had rewritten the narrative so completely that even if I walked in with Serafina, people might think I had brainwashed a random child. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, hard clarity. The last lingering thread of attachment to them, the guilt. The obligation snapped. They were not my family. They were obstacles. Liar, Serafina whispered. She had woken up and was watching the screen. That man is a liar, and the lady is mean. Yes, I said, turning off the TV. They are. I stood up and pinned the fake badge to my chest. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. I didn't see the tired, dirty woman who had been sleeping in a garage. I saw an architect, and I was about to demolish their entire world. Get dressed, Minnie, I said. We have a building to crash. I opened the folder where I had stored the blueprints. I traced the path to the HVAC control room on the schematic. Ben was right. The badge would get me past the perimeter. But to get Serafina into the VIP room, I needed a distraction. I needed chaos, and I knew exactly how to engineer it. Do you trust me? I asked her. She looked at me with those piercing blue eyes. Yes. Good, I said, because today we are going to tell the truth, and we are going to make sure everyone hears it. The service entrance of the Helios Tower was a hive of controlled chaos. Exactly as I had anticipated, catering trucks were unloading crates of champagne and trays of canapes. The air thick with the smell of roasted garlic and diesel fumes. I adjusted the high collar of the stiff white waiter's jacket I had swiped from a laundry rack near the loading dock. It was too big, but it covered my street clothes, my badge. The counterfeit one Ben had printed was clipped to my lapel. It identified me as Sarah Jenkins, event coordinator. It felt like a target burning against my chest. Make way, a sous chef shouted, pushing past me with a tray of ice sculptures. I gripped the handle of the stainless steel room service cart. Underneath the white linen tablecloth, nestled on the bottom shelf between extra napkins and silverware, Serafina was curled into a tight ball. I had left a small gap in the fabric for air, but my heart hammered against my ribs every time we hit a bump in the linoleum. Hold it, a security guard said. Stepping in front of me, he was wearing an earpiece and looked bored but thorough. Badge. I held my breath and tilted the laminate toward him. Late addition to the VIP service team, I said, forcing a tone of harried annoyance. If I don't get these linens to the green room, Mr. Sterling is going to fire someone, and I am making sure it is not me. The guard glanced at the badge, then at my face. He didn't scan it. He just saw a stressed employee and waved me through. Go ahead. I exhaled, pushing the cart into the freight elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing me in with my own reflection in the polished steel. I looked like a ghost, but ghosts were invisible, and that was exactly what I needed to be. We rose to the 40th floor. The plan was simple. Wheel the cart to the service corridor adjacent to the VIP holding room, wait for the speeches to begin, and then push Serafina straight onto the stage. But as the elevator dinged and the doors opened, I knew the plan was already dead. The hallway was crawling with security, not the regular event staff, but men in dark suits with earpieces, Julian's private contractors. They were checking every face, every ID. "Gloria," a small voice whispered from under the table. "I hear them." "Quiet," I hissed. I turned the cart sharply to the left, heading toward the main banquet kitchen. I needed to find another way. As I pushed through the swinging double doors into the kitchen, I glanced up at the black dome of a security camera in the corner. I kept my head down, but I felt the lens tracking me. 40 floors below, in the security command center, Julian Sterling was likely watching, and I was right. Suddenly, the ambient music in the hallway cut out. A sharp, electronic chime echoed through the building. "Security alert," a computerized voice announced. "Lockdown in effect. All staff remain in your current sectors. Elevators are disabled." The heavy fire doors at the end of the kitchen corridor slammed shut with a magnetic thud. I was trapped. The kitchen staff stopped chopping and stirring, looking around in confusion. "What is going on?" a chef asked. I didn't answer. I knew exactly what was happening. Julian had seen me. He was sealing the building floor by floor to trap us like rats. I scanned the room. It was a commercial kitchen, gleaming with stainless steel. My architect's eye stripped the room down to its schematics. I looked at the ceiling, the fire suppression system. It was a zoned system, heat activated. If I triggered it here, the doors would have to unlock automatically for evacuation. It was a safety override code written into the building laws I had memorized for my licensing exam. I grabbed a creme brulee torch from a prep station. "Hey," the pastry chef yelled. "You can't touch that." "Fire in the hole," I muttered. I dragged a step stool under the heat sensor near the back exit. I clicked the torch on. The blue flame hissed. I held it up toward the red bulb on the ceiling. 1 second, 2 seconds. Pop. The sprinkler head burst. A deluge of dark, oily water sprayed down, instantly followed by the deafening shriek of the fire alarm. Strobe lights began to flash. "Fire, get out!" I screamed, adding to the panic. The kitchen erupted into chaos. Chefs dropped their knives and ran. The magnetic locks on the doors disengaged with a click. I grabbed the cart and shoved it through the back exit, slipping into the service hallway amidst the fleeing staff. I was running toward the VIP wing, my feet slipping on the wet floor, when a hand shot out from a maintenance alcove and grabbed my arm. "Gotcha." I spun around, but I froze. It was Preston. My brother looked like a wreck. His suit was torn. His face was bruised purple and yellow, and his eyes were wild with desperation. He had somehow sneaked in, probably through the loading dock before security tightened, looking for a payday. "Let go of me!" I shouted, trying to wrench my arm free. "No way," Preston snarled, tightening his grip. "I saw the alert. They are looking for you. Do you know how much the reward is? I can fix everything. Gloria, I just need to turn you in." He looked at the cart. He ripped the tablecloth away. Serafina shrieked, pressing herself against the metal shelf. "There she is," Preston laughed, a manic, ugly sound. "The golden ticket. Come here, you little brat." He reached for her. Something inside me snapped. It was the final cable of the bridge that connected me to my family. The bridge I had been trying to repair for 29 years. It collapsed into the abyss. I didn't pull away. I stepped into him. I used the momentum of his own greed against him. I slammed the heel of my palm into his nose with every ounce of rage I had stored since childhood. There was a sickening crunch. Preston howled, letting go of me and clutching his face. Blood spurted between his fingers. He stumbled back, tripping over his own feet, and fell hard onto the polished marble floor. He looked up at me, eyes watering, shocked not by the pain, but by the fact that his shadow had finally fought back. You hit me," he whimpered. "I am your brother." I stood over him, breathing hard, the water from the sprinklers dripping off my nose. "No," I said, my voice cold and hard as the steel beams of the tower. "You are just a thief, and I am not your servant anymore. I am not your bank, and I am certainly not your sister." I kicked his hand away from my ankle. Stay down, Preston, or the next one puts you to sleep. I grabbed the cart handle. Let's go. Minnie? We sprinted down the corridor, leaving Preston moaning on the floor. The double doors to the VIP anteroom were ahead. Beyond them was the stage where Silas Thorne was about to speak. We burst through the doors. The corridor was silent, insulated from the chaos of the alarms by soundproof glass. It was a long, plush hallway lined with portraits of the company founders. And standing in the middle of it, blocking our path, was Julian Sterling. He was calm, terrifyingly calm. He held a pistol fitted with a suppressor in his right hand. He didn't look like a businessman anymore. He looked like an executioner. I have to admit, Julian said, raising the gun. You are persistent, Miss Fairbanks. Most people would have taken the hint after the hitmen. I stopped the cart, pulling Serafina behind me. My body was the only shield she had. It is over, Julian, I said, my voice shaking but loud. The fire alarm tripped the automatic police dispatch. They will be here in 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a lifetime. Julian smiled thinly. Enough time to kill a kidnapper and her hostage in a tragic confrontation. I will be the hero who tried to save her. He aimed the gun at my chest. I stared down the black barrel. Knowing I couldn't dodge a bullet, I closed my eyes, bracing for the impact. No. A small blur shot out from behind me. Serafina didn't run away. She ran forward. She stood directly in front of me, her arms spread wide, her small chin lifted in defiance. Uncle Julian, she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. I am still alive. Julian flinched. For a split second, the sight of the girl he had drowned, standing there in a waiter's jacket and dirty sneakers, broke his composure. The gun wavered. Get out of the way, Serafina, he hissed, his eyes darting to the door behind us. No, she yelled, tears streaming down her face. You hurt me. You hurt Gloria. I am going to tell Grandpa. The door to the stage behind Julian opened. The sound of Serafina's scream had penetrated the heavy oak. Tell Grandpa what? A deep, confused voice asked. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He looked old and frail, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at Julian with the gun. He looked at me, dripping wet. And then he looked at the little girl standing in the middle of the hallway. The color drained from Silas's face. He dropped the cane he was holding. Serafina, he whispered, as if he were seeing a ghost. Julian's face twisted into a mask of panic. He swung the gun back toward us. She is an imposter. Silas, it is a trick. Get back. But the hesitation was all I needed. I didn't wait for him to pull the trigger. I grabbed the heavy silver serving tray from the top of the cart and hurled it like a discus. The silver serving tray I had hurled clattered against the wall with a deafening crash, missing Julian's head by inches, but shattering a priceless vase on a pedestal. The noise was like a gunshot, freezing the tableau in the hallway for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity. Silas Thorne stood in the doorway of the VIP suite, his hand trembling as he gripped the doorframe. He looked like a man watching a resurrection. His eyes, clouded with 6 months of grief, locked onto the small, defiant figure of the girl standing between a wet, disheveled waiter and a gunman. Serafina, he croaked, the name tearing out of his throat like a prayer. Julian recovered first. The mask of the grieving uncle slipped back into place with terrifying speed, though sweat was beading on his forehead. He kept the gun trained on me, but shouted over his shoulder at Silas. Get back, Silas. This woman is armed. She is the kidnapper. I tracked her down. But she is using the girl as a human shield. Liar, I screamed, my voice raw. He is going to kill us. Security, Julian bellowed, trying to drown me out, his finger tightening on the trigger. Take the shot. She is unstable. But the bodyguards flanking Silas were not Julian's hired thugs. They were men who had served Silas for 20 years. They didn't look at me. They looked at the gun in Julian's hand, a gun that had no place in a secure boardroom. Silas took a step forward, ignoring the weapon. Serafina, is it really you? Serafina didn't hesitate. She broke from my grasp. She didn't run away from the danger. She ran toward the only safety she had ever known. She sprinted across the plush carpet, her sneakers squeaking on the floor. "Grandpa!" She slammed into the old man's legs, burying her face in his coat. Silas dropped to his knees, disregarding his arthritis, disregarding his dignity. He wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair, sobbing openly. It was a guttural, primal sound of relief that echoed through the corridor. "I thought you were gone," Silas wept. "I thought you were gone." Serafina pulled back, her hands framing his tear-stained face. She pointed a shaking finger at Julian, who was now backing away, his eyes darting between the exits. "He did it, Grandpa," she said, her voice clear and ringing with truth. "Uncle Julian pushed me. He put me in the bad boat. He told me to die." The air in the hallway changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Silas Thorne looked up. The grief in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, volcanic rage that was terrifying to behold. He looked at Julian, the man he had treated like a son, the man he was about to hand his empire to. "Julian," Silas whispered. The single word carried the weight of a death sentence. Julian panicked. The charade was over. There was no spinning this. He was cornered, and like a rat, he snapped. "It was business. Silas!" Julian screamed, his composure shattering. He raised the gun, aiming not at me, but at the old man and the child. "You wouldn't let go. You were going to let the company rot with your sentimental garbage. I did what had to be done." I saw his knuckle turn white on the trigger. "No." I lunged forward, though I knew I was too far away to stop him. But I didn't have to. The bodyguard to Silas's left moved with a speed that defied the human eye. He didn't reach for his own weapon. He simply stepped into the line of fire and chopped Julian's wrist with a sickening crack. The gun flew from Julian's hand, skittering across the marble floor. Before Julian could scream, the second bodyguard tackled him. They hit the floor hard. Julian thrashed, spitting curses. But he was pinned. His face was pressed against the carpet, his expensive suit tearing at the seams. "Secure him," Silas commanded, his voice like grinding stones. He didn't even look at Julian. He was busy checking Serafina for injuries, running his hands over her arms, checking her face. I stood there, watching them, the adrenaline that had fueled me for days, that had carried me through the blizzard, the garage, the chase, and the fire, suddenly evaporated. My legs turned to water. The room spun. I sank to the floor, my back sliding down the wall. I was gasping for air, my chest heaving. I was done. I had delivered the package. I had finished the job. "Miss," I looked up. Silas Thorne was standing over me. He was holding Serafina's hand, but he was looking at me. He extended a hand that had shaken presidents and kings. "Serafina says you saved her," Silas said softly. "She says you are the helper." I took his hand. It was warm and dry. He pulled me to my feet, steadying me when I swayed. "I just did what anyone would do," I whispered. "No," Silas shook his head, looking at my wet clothes, my fake badge, the exhaustion etched into my face. "Most people would have looked away. You didn't." Sirens wailed outside, louder now. The fire exit burst open, and a dozen uniformed police officers swarmed the hallway, guns drawn. They saw Julian pinned on the floor, the billionaire, and the child. The situation was assessed in seconds. "Get him up," a sergeant barked. They hauled Julian to his feet. He was bleeding from a split lip, his eyes wild. As they clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists, Serafina stepped forward. She tugged on the sleeve of the police sergeant. "Mr. Policeman?" she asked politely. The sergeant looked down, surprised. "Yes, sweetie." "He has a book," she said, pointing a small finger at Julian. "A black book with numbers. He keeps it on the wall behind the horse picture in his office. It tells all the bad things he did." Julian went pale. "Shut up," he shrieked. "She is lying. She is a child." "Check the office," the sergeant ordered 2 of his officers. "Get a warrant for that safe." Julian slumped, defeated. The leverage, the secrets, the money, it was all gone. Destroyed by the memory of a 6-year-old he had underestimated. As they dragged Julian away, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. Gloria. Oh, thank God, my baby. My stomach churned. Sylvia came running down the hall, her makeup smeared, feigning hysteria. Preston hobbled behind her, holding a bloody handkerchief to his broken nose. They had likely charmed or bullied their way past the confused perimeter security by claiming to be the family of the hero. Sylvia threw her arms open, rushing toward me, but stopped short when she saw Silas Thorne. She pivoted instantly, her face transforming into a mask of obsequious adoration. "Mr. Thorne," Sylvia gasped, clasping her hands over her heart. "Oh, praise the Lord. Our prayers have been answered. We have been so worried about our dear Gloria and the little girl." She reached out and patted me on the shoulder, a touch that made my skin crawl. "I told the police. I said, my daughter Gloria might be impulsive, but she has a heart of gold. We raised that little girl like our own these past few days. Didn't we, Preston?" Preston nodded vigorously, wincing as the movement hurt his nose. "Yeah, absolutely. We fed her, clothed her, gave her a place to sleep. We are just glad everyone is safe. We are a team." Sylvia looked at Silas with a greedy glint in her eyes. "It was a lot of sacrifice. You know, we risked everything, our home, our reputation. But for a child, we would do anything." I stood frozen, unable to speak. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. They were rewriting history in real time, positioning themselves to catch the falling coin of Silas's gratitude. They were going to steal my victory. They were going to steal my freedom. "Is that so?" Silas asked. He didn't smile. He didn't offer his hand. He stepped back, placing himself between me and my family. He looked at Sylvia, then at Preston, with the cold, dissecting gaze of a predator who had just spotted weak prey. "You raised her," Silas repeated, his voice dangerously low. "You fed her." "Oh, yes," Sylvia beamed, thinking she had hooked him. "Like a princess, the best of everything." Silas turned to me. "Gloria, is this true?" I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had thrown my blankets into the snow. I looked at the brother who had sold a child for gambling money. I looked at the people who had made me sleep in a garage and eat scraps. I reached into my pocket. My hand closed around the old smartphone I had kept, the one with the cracked screen that I used to record my site visits. But it had also been recording the last time I was in the kitchen. "No," I said clearly. "It is not true." I pulled the phone out. I tapped the screen. Preston's voice, tinny but unmistakable, filled the silent hallway. "I am her financial manager. She owes me that money," followed by the recording from the garage door. "My sister is in the garage. She has a girl I told you I would deliver." Sylvia's face went gray. Preston took a step back, bumping into a police officer. Silas listened to the recording. Then he listened to the silence that followed. He looked at the bruises on Preston's face, bruises I had put there. He looked at my emaciated frame. He turned back to Sylvia. His expression was one of absolute revulsion. "Really?" Silas asked. It was a single word, spoken with the quiet intensity of a collapsing star. It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. "Mr. Thorne, please, you misunderstand." Sylvia stammered, backing away. That is out of context. Gloria is manipulative. She edited that." "Officer," Silas said, gesturing to the sergeant, "I would like to file charges against these 2 individuals." "Charges?" Preston squeaked. "For what? We are the good guys." "Conspiracy to commit kidnapping," Silas listed, ticking off the crimes on his fingers. "Extortion, child endangerment, and based on the condition of your daughter and my granddaughter, severe neglect and abuse." "Wait," Sylvia shrieked as an officer grabbed her arm. "You can't do this. We are the victims. Gloria, tell them we love you." I looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear she had instilled in me for 29 years, and I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a profound, empty silence where the love used to be. "I don't know you," I said softly. "I don't have a family." "Get them out of my sight," Silas ordered. As the police dragged Sylvia and Preston away, kicking and screaming, begging for mercy, blaming each other, I felt a small hand slip into mine. Serafina looked up at me and smiled. "It is okay, Gloria. You have a family now." I looked at the billionaire and the little girl. The tears finally came, hot and cleansing. I squeezed her hand back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow. I was the light. The fall of Julian Sterling was not a ripple. It was a tsunami that cleared the rot from the foundations of Thorn Dynamics. In the days following the incident at the Helios Tower, the media frenzy was relentless. But this time, the cameras were not pointed at me with accusation. They were pointed at Julian as he was led out of the precinct in handcuffs, his face hidden behind a jacket, facing charges of attempted murder, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. The black book Serafina had remembered proved to be the smoking gun, detailing every dirty cent he had stolen. He was looking at life behind bars, and the city breathed a collective sigh of relief. A week later, a limousine the color of midnight pulled up to the curb of the motel where I was still staying. The driver, a man with white gloves and a kind smile, opened the door. "Mr. Thorne requests your presence, Miss Fairbanks," he said. I was not the only passenger. When the car stopped at the front gates of the Thorne estate, I saw another vehicle arriving. It was a taxi, and stepping out of it were my mother and Preston. They looked nervous, but strangely hopeful. Preston's nose was splinted and taped, and Sylvia had dressed in her Sunday best, clutching a knockoff designer handbag. They had been released on bail pending their hearing, a mercy I suspected Silas had arranged solely for this moment. When they saw me, they didn't sneer, they didn't yell, they hurried over, their eyes gleaming with a desperate, greedy light. "Gloria, honey," Sylvia cooed, reaching for my hand but stopping when I pulled away. "We have been talking to a lawyer. He says if we present a united front, we can get a settlement. We did house the heiress. After all, squatters' rights, or something like that. We just need you to nod along." "You guys are delusional," I said, walking past them toward the massive oak doors of the mansion. "It is business, Gloria," Preston hissed, trotting to keep up. 50-50 split. We just want what is owed to us." The doors opened, revealing a foyer that was larger than the entire house I grew up in. Silas Thorne stood at the bottom of the grand staircase. He looked 10 years younger than he had on television. The gray pallor was gone, replaced by the vigorous aura of a man who had his future back. But my eyes were drawn to the small figure running down the stairs. Gloria. Serafina was no longer the waif in the oversized trench coat. She was wearing a dress of pale pink silk, her hair curled into bouncing ringlets, her cheeks rosy with health. She launched herself off the bottom step and flew into my arms. I caught her, burying my face in her neck, smelling strawberries and fresh linen. "Creative director," I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. "You look beautiful." "I missed you," she said, pulling back to look at me seriously. "Grandpa says you are my godmother now. That means you have to come to all my birthday parties. It is the law." I laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful in my throat. "Then I will follow the law." Silas stepped forward, placing a hand on Serafina's shoulder. He looked at me with deep respect. "Gloria, there are no words sufficient for what you did. You gave me back my life. Now, I want to give you yours. Name it. Anything you want. A check, a house, a trust fund. It is yours." I looked at him, then at Serafina. I thought about the cold nights in the garage, the hunger, the fear. I thought about the designs I had drawn on napkins. "I don't want charity, Mr. Thorne," I said, standing tall. "I want a job, a real job. I want to be a lead architect. I want to earn my place." Silas smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Done. You start Monday, and not as an architect, as the director of design for the Helios project. You know the building better than anyone. After all..." The sound broke the moment. Sylvia stepped forward, dragging Preston with her. She cleared her throat loudly. "That is wonderful for Gloria." "Truly," Sylvia said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "But we must discuss the compensation for the rest of the family. We provided shelter for the child for nearly a week. In this economy, room and board are expensive, plus the emotional distress. We are thinking $5 million would be fair. A nice round number." Preston nodded. "And a car. My sister wrecked the sedan." Silas Thorne's smile vanished. His face hardened into granite. He motioned to a lawyer standing in the shadows, who stepped forward and placed a thick stack of documents on the table. "Compensation," Silas repeated, the word tasting like iron. "Yes, let us discuss what you are owed." He picked up the first document. "For Preston Fairbanks, I am filing a civil suit for $10 million for emotional damages to my granddaughter. Additionally, the district attorney has accepted the evidence from Gloria's phone recording as proof of conspiracy to commit kidnapping and human trafficking. That is 20 years, son, minimum." Preston's knees buckled. He grabbed the table to stay upright. "And for you, Sylvia," Silas continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I have the testimony of your neighbors regarding the living conditions you forced your daughter into, and the testimony of Serafina regarding your threat to sell her. I am suing you for every penny you have, and every penny you will ever have. You will lose your house. You will lose your pension. You will spend the rest of your life in a state facility." The silence that followed was absolute. The color drained from Sylvia's face until she looked like a corpse. The arrogance, the greed, the delusion, it all shattered under the weight of the truth. They looked at Silas, but they saw no mercy there. They looked at the lawyer, who just stared back blankly. Then, slowly, terrifyingly, they turned their eyes to me. I was their only lifeline, the daughter they had abused, the sister they had betrayed. Sylvia let out a sob and threw herself onto the marble floor. She crawled toward me, her designer handbag forgotten. She grabbed the hem of my jeans. "Gloria, Gloria, please," she wailed, tears streaming down her face. Tell him I am your mother. I raised you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Don't let them take everything." Preston dropped to his knees beside her, grasping at my shoes. "Sis, come on. I am sorry about the laptop. I am sorry about the garage. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. Right? You can't let him send me to jail. Please, I am begging you." I looked down at them, my mother and my brother, groveling on the floor, weeping and clutching at my ankles. It was the exact image of the title of my life story, begging at my feet. I waited for the satisfaction. I waited for the rush of victory. But all I felt was a quiet, distant pity. They looked so small, so pathetic. I gently pulled my feet away from their grasp. I stepped back, creating a distance that was more than just physical. "You are right," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Blood is thicker than water, but love is thicker than blood, and there is no love here." "Gloria," Sylvia shrieked, reaching out again. "You are not my family," I said, looking her in the eye. "My family is the people who didn't leave me when I was freezing in the dark. My family is the little girl who held my hand when I had nothing. You are just people I used to know." I turned my back on them. "Take them away," Silas ordered. I walked toward the glass doors leading to the garden, Serafina's hand in mine. I heard the wails of my mother and brother fading as security escorted them out of the mansion and out of my life forever. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood on the observation deck of the completed Helios Tower. The wind whipped my hair, but I wasn't cold. I was wearing a tailored wool coat, bought with my own salary. Below me, the city of Ironhaven sparkled like a sea of diamonds. "It is high up," a voice said. I looked down. Serafina was standing beside me, holding a telescope. "It is," I agreed, "but the view is worth the climb." I had a new apartment downtown, a spacious loft with huge windows and a heating system that never failed. I had a team of designers who respected me. I had Silas, who treated me like a daughter, and I had Serafina, who visited every weekend to build forts in my living room. I had lost everything to find myself. I had been a shadow, a servant, a victim. But as I looked out at the horizon, I knew the truth. I was none of those things. I was Gloria Fairbanks. I was the architect of my own destiny. And for the first time in my life, the foundation was rock solid. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment down below and share your thoughts on Gloria's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Family Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story. See you in the next video.